Rachel froze on the porch as the light in her master bedroom flickered like a warning she couldn't ignore. Her keys trembled in her hand, the cold metal biting her skin harder than the fear curling in her chest. For 15 years, she had clawed her way toward this house, each sacrifice a brick, each broken night a beam. Tonight the air felt wrong, heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath against an unseen intrusion. She stepped inside and sensed a presence, a shift, a quiet rebellion rising from the very rooms she designed. Rachel had no idea that this moment, this trembling second, would be the line dividing her old life from the new. Rachel planned the dinner with a quiet hope that still felt fragile in her hands. She arranged the table with soft candles, gentle plates, and the calm she wished to believe in. Her mother Janet arrived first, carrying the same sharp smile she always used before a demand. Howard followed behind her, heavy steps echoing an authority Rachel never granted him. Sophie swept in last, glowing with the confidence of someone certain the world owed her something. Rachel tried to breathe, to anchor herself, to pretend this night could be peaceful. She served the meal and listened to polite noises drifting across the table like thin smoke. No one asked about her work, her projects, or the promotion she had fought 10 years to earn. Instead, they spoke about Sophie's upcoming wedding, as if it were the center of the universe. Rachel let them talk, nodding when required, swallowing the familiar ache of invisibility. Then Janet placed her fork down with a soft clang that silenced the room. She looked at Rachel with the expression of a judge preparing a verdict already decided. "We've all talked," Janet said, smoothing her napkin with slow, deliberate movements. "And we've agreed that your master's suite will be the perfect wedding gift for Sophie." The words landed like a blow, sharp, cold, and impossibly bold. Rachel blinked, thinking she must have misheard, because no one could be that brazen. But Sophie smiled, wide and victorious, as if claiming a prize she'd long been promised. Howard leaned back, approving, as though Rachel's property were his to distribute. Rachel's voice broke the stunned silence, soft but steady enough to hold its ground. "No," she said, forcing her breath to stay level. "That room is mine. This house is mine. There is no discussion." Janet scoffed, a brittle sound dripping with contempt. "Don't be selfish, Rachel. Family shares. Family sacrifices." Rachel felt the old guilt rising, that conditioned urge to surrender, to fold in on herself. But the years of being overlooked and dismissed pressed against her ribs with new resistance. "I'm not giving away my home," she repeated, slower, firmer, more certain than before. Sophie rolled her eyes so dramatically, the gesture felt rehearsed. "You don't even need that room," she said, her tone sugary and poisonous. "It fits us better. Think of it as helping me start my marriage right." Rachel stared at her sister, astonished by the entitlement woven into every syllable. "This isn't about what fits," she answered. "It's my property. You don't get to decide that." Howard slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware and jolting the candles. "You watch your tone," he growled, eyes narrowing with manufactured authority. "You wouldn't have anything without this family." Rachel felt the heat rise in her face, anger carving a path through years of silence. "I bought this house alone," she said, each word sharp as glass. "You did not help me. You do not own it." The statement seemed to ignite something in Howard, something ugly and quick. He stood abruptly, leaning across the table, casting a heavy shadow over her. "Ungrateful girl," he hissed, before his hand shot forward in a violent, stinging slap. The sound cracked through the room like breaking bone, leaving Rachel stunned and breathless. No one moved. No one defended her. Silence settled like ash over the ruined dinner. In that moment, Rachel understood something with a clarity that chilled her. This was not a family seeking unity. This was a family seeking possession. And they had just declared war. Rachel returned to the house 3 days later with a hope that barely held itself together. She stepped from the driveway and sensed a disturbance humming under the quiet afternoon air. A pair of unfamiliar shoes sat on her welcome mat like a warning she never received. She unlocked the door and froze at the sight of suitcases stacked like invading soldiers. The scent of Sophie's perfume drifted through the hallway with bold, territorial confidence. Derek's jacket hung on her coat rack as though it had always belonged there. Rachel's heartbeat stumbled, unsure whether to race or stop entirely. She moved deeper inside and felt the wrongness spread like ink across her home. Voices echoed from the upstairs landing, light, carefree, thoughtless. She climbed the stairs with steady steps, though every instinct screamed to brace for impact. At the end of the hall, the door to her master bedroom stood wide open. New curtains fluttered in a breeze she didn't create. A framed engagement photo rested on her nightstand where her lamp used to be. Rachel stepped inside and saw the final blow, her belongings thrown into messy piles on the floor. Her clothes were crumpled, tangled, tossed like trash beside her empty dresser. Her personal sketches lay bent and smudged, pages torn from their binding. Her favorite throw blanket, the one she saved months to buy, was shoved into a plastic bag. Sophie emerged from the bathroom, wearing a robe Rachel purchased last spring. She looked at Rachel with irritation, as if Rachel were interrupting something she owned. "Oh, good you're here," Sophie said, waving a hand toward the scattered mess. "We needed the space, so we moved your stuff out. You can take the guest room." Rachel swallowed hard, feeling the room spin in disbelief. "You moved into my bedroom without permission," she said, the words sharp but trembling. Derek appeared behind Sophie, giving Rachel a patronizing shrug. "It's temporary," he said, glancing around as though admiring his new territory. "Besides, this room works better for us. Bigger closet. Better light." Rachel felt the floor tilt beneath her feet, rage rising like heat through her bones. "You had no right," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the quake inside her. "This is my home. You cannot just take it." Sophie crossed her arms, the gesture dripping with smug entitlement. "You're being dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "Mom said it was fine. She told us to get settled before the wedding plans get too crazy." Rachel stared at her sister, stunned by the audacity woven into every breath she took. "I don't care what Mom said," she answered with low, controlled fury. "She doesn't own this house. You don't own this house." Derek stepped forward, his expression tightening with annoyance. "Look," he said, his tone low and condescending. "We're family. You should want to help us. You sitting in this big room alone is kind of wasteful." Rachel's jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists she refused to use. "This isn't helping," she replied. "This is trespassing." Sophie scoffed, flipping her hair with exaggerated offense. "You always make everything harder than it needs to be," she snapped. "Just take the guest room and stop acting like you're some kind of queen." Rachel took a slow breath, the hurt and fury merging into a heavy, focused weight. She gathered her scattered belongings in silence, each item a reminder of the violation. Every drawer she opened revealed more of their intrusion, more evidence of disrespect. Her jewelry box sat half open, pieces shifted and tangled by careless hands. Her sheets had been replaced with cheap, floral fabric she would never choose. Her mirror held fingerprints that didn't belong to her. As she packed her things, Sophie leaned against the doorway with casual arrogance. "You'll get used to it," she said lightly. "It's only until after the wedding. Then we'll figure out something more permanent." Rachel paused, the words slicing deeper than any insult before. "More permanent," she repeated softly, as if tasting the threat beneath it. Derek smiled in a way that made her skin crawl. "Exactly," he said. "We're planning our future here." In that instant, Rachel understood something cold and precise. They weren't borrowing her space. They were claiming it. And this was only the beginning. Rachel returned home each day, feeling the weight of the invasion pressing against her chest. Every corner she turned, she found traces of Sophie and Derek's presence lingering like smoke. Trash was left where it did not belong, dishes piled in the sink like silent insults. Her attempts to clean or organize were met with subtle sabotage, moved or broken objects. Sophie would laugh from the hallway, a sharp, deliberate sound meant to mock her efforts. "You're cleaning again." "Really?" she said, shaking her head with exaggerated pity. Derek would appear behind her, smirking, hands in pockets like a man watching a game unfold. "You should relax. It's not like this is your home anymore," he whispered once, leaning close. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face, shock mingling with rage she could no longer ignore. She tried reason with her family, pleading for boundaries, but the words bounced off walls thick with entitlement. Janet, in particular, became a relentless presence, gaslighting Rachel at every opportunity. "You're so ungrateful. We've only been helping you," Janet would say, voice honeyed and dangerous. "You think this house is yours alone. Think again." Howard's threats escalated with alarming regularity. "I could sell this place if I wanted," he said one night, looming over her as she unpacked books. "Names on paper don't mean much. I have power here." Rachel's sleep became fragmented, haunted by imagined intrusions and real confrontations alike. She woke to footsteps outside her bedroom, doors opening without permission, voices laughing in her space. Her work began to suffer, projects delayed, emails left unanswered, creativity blocked. Each night she counted the cost in lost hours, in anxiety that crept into every cell. She tried to maintain civility, explaining calmly that their behavior was harassment, illegal and invasive. Sophie mocked her concerns openly. "You're paranoid," she said, tossing Rachel's journal onto the floor. "Nothing illegal here. Just family having fun." Rachel's protests were met with laughter, shared glances, and smirks from the adults she once trusted. Even minor attempts to enforce order, locking her bedroom door, marking her possessions, were undone quickly. Keys were taken, doors unlocked, personal items moved or damaged in subtle acts of defiance. Howard leaned in during one confrontation, voice low and venomous. "Stop acting like a victim. You'll ruin the family's fun. Or worse, you'll ruin your own life." Rachel felt isolated, trapped in her own home by people meant to support her. She began keeping detailed notes, documenting every slight, insult, and act of intrusion. Each entry was meticulous, recording times, dates, and exact words spoken. She took photos of damaged property and rearranged furniture, capturing the chaos as proof. Phone recordings of arguments became a lifeline, a way to preserve truth against denial. Despite the constant attacks, Rachel refused to cower, though the mental toll was heavy. She discovered a strange clarity in tracking their patterns, in predicting where and how they would invade next. Sophie's smug routines, Derek's calculated provocations, Janet's gaslighting all became predictable threads. Rachel began to see the full scope of the strategy against her, recognizing the abuse as systematic, deliberate, unrelenting. The realization sharpened her focus, turning fear into something cold and purposeful. She would not simply endure this any longer. Every insult, every act of sabotage, every threat added fuel to her resolve. She would fight back, legally and strategically, rather than emotionally. Her home was her sanctuary, and she intended to reclaim it. This daily torment forged a resolve she had never known, a quiet but unbreakable determination. Rachel was no longer just surviving. She was preparing for a confrontation she knew she had to win. Rachel arrived home that evening to find lights blazing and music blasting through every room. Voices echoed down the hall, loud, careless, celebrating in a way that belonged nowhere near her space. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, heart pounding, unsure whether to confront or retreat. The sound of laughter, high and sharp, pierced her like a warning she had ignored too long. As she ascended the stairs, the smell of alcohol and perfume hit her, thick and invasive. Her bedroom door was wide open, the curtains drawn back as if inviting the world in. Sophie danced in the center of the room, a wine glass in hand, her grin smug and victorious. Derek leaned against the wall, surveying the chaos with a satisfied, lazy smile. Janet appeared beside them, arms crossed, watching Rachel like a predator sizing up its prey. Howard stood behind them all, the authority in his stance bolstered by the crowd gathered in her home. Rachel froze as he raised his voice, carrying it over the music and chatter. "This house is no longer just Rachel," he announced, voice booming, proud and cruel. The room erupted into laughter and cheers, strangers and family alike applauding the claim. Rachel's chest tightened as disbelief threatened to overwhelm her calm. She stepped forward, but the crowd parted easily, like she was invisible. Sophie twirled, glass clinking against the table, and shouted, "Finally, it's ours." Janet clapped slowly, mock applause, delight in the humiliation she had orchestrated. Howard's eyes locked on Rachel, sharp, calculating, testing her reaction. "You see, Rachel, this is what reality looks like," he said with a cruel grin. The words cut through her, but she forced herself to breathe, to steady the surge of panic. She raised her phone discreetly, capturing video silently, every angle, every smirk, every insult. Her fingers trembled only slightly as she recorded, the device a lifeline in the madness. She could hear herself thinking clearly for the first time in days, despite the chaos around her. This was not a moment for shouting or pleading. It was a moment to collect truth. Every action, every laugh, every claim of ownership would serve as evidence later. Rachel moved through the crowd with quiet precision, pretending to be invisible while documenting everything. Sophie noticed the phone, her eyes narrowing, but Rachel held her gaze, steady and cold. "You're filming again," Sophie mocked, voice sharp, but Rachel didn't respond. Howard waved dismissively, assuming control, unaware that Rachel's silence was her strength. The party raged on, oblivious to her presence, oblivious to the fact they were being recorded. Glass shattered at one corner as someone knocked over a bottle, laughter following the crash. Rachel's notebook filled quickly, jotting mental notes while her phone ran, every word captured. She traced the layout, nodding where each person stood, who spoke, who laughed, who mocked. By the end of the night, Rachel had gathered hours of undeniable evidence. As the last guest stumbled out, she remained silent, calculating her next move. Her anger was sharp, but beneath it, a cold clarity settled like steel in her chest. No one had legal authority here, and she intended to prove it. This night of public humiliation had become the key to her defense, her plan, her power. Rachel finally locked the door behind her, her phone full of video, her mind set. She would no longer be a victim. She would act decisively, with proof, with strategy, with law on her side. Tonight had been their declaration. Tomorrow, Rachel would begin hers. Rachel sat at the edge of the hotel bed, phone and notebook open, mind racing. She began cataloging every act of intrusion, every insult, every threat she had endured. Photos of the bedroom, now a battleground, filled her phone in rapid succession. Drawers left open, clothes thrown, damaged furniture, all documented meticulously. She labeled each photo with date, time, and description, leaving no detail vague. Videos from the party were downloaded, trimmed, and backed up in multiple locations. She replayed recordings of arguments with Sophie, Derek, Janet, and Howard. Each word, each tone, each laugh became evidence, irrefutable and sharp. Her journal captured the emotional and psychological toll day by day. She wrote long entries describing sleepless nights and anxiety from constant threats. Every threatening phrase from Howard was recorded, time-stamped, and saved. Calls from Janet, admitting the master suite would go to Sophie, were transcribed. Rachel dug out mortgage documents, proving the house was fully in her name alone. Bank statements, proof of payments, utilities, all lined up to show sole ownership. Even small items, like bills for repairs she personally covered, were photographed. She organized receipts chronologically, forming a timeline of responsibility and intrusion. Each piece of evidence stacked like bricks in a wall of legal certainty. Grace Monroe, her friend and lawyer, guided her through every step with precision. "Document everything," Grace said, voice calm. "Every little thing counts." Rachel followed the advice to the letter, meticulous, determined, unflinching. She made copies, both digital and physical, ensuring redundancy against loss. Notes about each confrontation were expanded with context and direct quotes. Rachel recorded interactions where Sophie mocked her or Derek minimized her authority. Even casual remarks became part of the record, demonstrating intent and pattern. She collected statements from neighbors who witnessed loud parties or trespassing. Grace suggested formalizing the evidence into an organized legal packet. Rachel categorized photos, videos, calls, and notes by type and by date. She double-checked ownership papers to confirm there were no legal loopholes. Every threat from Howard and Janet was highlighted with context and witnesses. Rachel created a master spreadsheet of incidents to track escalation over time. She noted Sophie's repeated occupation of the master suite and removal of belongings. Evidence of physical intimidation, like the slap at dinner, was carefully documented. Rachel kept her own emotional reactions, logged as supporting testimony of impact. Even minor property damage was recorded with before and after photos for clarity. The combined materials formed an undeniable record of harassment and trespass. Rachel felt a sense of control returning, replacing the fear she had carried for weeks. Her meticulous gathering transformed chaos into strategy, anger into actionable proof. She reviewed everything one more time, checking for gaps or missing details. Nothing was overlooked. Every detail would support her legal case. By the end of the week, Rachel had assembled a complete, airtight dossier. Grace reviewed it carefully, nodding at each section with approval and focus. "This," Grace said quietly, "is more than evidence. This is your shield and your sword." Rachel felt a surge of clarity, understanding for the first time the power of preparation. The house had been violated. The family had assumed control. Now Rachel held the tools to reclaim everything lawfully, decisively, permanently. Rachel woke early, determination steady, her dossier of evidence at her side. Grace Monroe sat across from her, reviewing each document with precise focus. "We proceed now," Grace said. "No hesitation. No compromise." Rachel nodded, the tension in her shoulders hardening into resolve. They drafted the petition for an emergency protective order immediately. Every threat, every act of trespass, every abusive word was included. Photos, videos, recordings, and witness statements formed attachments. Grace emphasized clarity, showing Rachel how to present facts without emotion. Rachel repeated each point aloud, committing the narrative to memory. They filed a request for a restraining order against Janet, Howard, Sophie, and Derek. The legal language was precise: immediate removal, prohibition of contact, and exclusive use of the house. Rachel submitted the documents online and in person at the courthouse. The clerk accepted the filings, nodding urgency, and scheduled an emergency hearing. Meanwhile, Grace coordinated with local law enforcement to ensure enforcement of the order. Rachel learned step by step how the court could authorize immediate removal. She understood that the law now operated as her shield and her weapon. Grace prepared her for questions, rehearsing answers and providing strategies. "What will you do if they resist?" Grace asked, voice calm but serious. Rachel responded, "I will step back. I will follow the law. I will let them enforce it." This control replaced fear with focus, panic with strategy. Rachel packed essential belongings into a small, organized suitcase. She left the rest at a friend's place to prevent further interference. The hotel became a temporary headquarters, safe and private. Rachel checked her phones and cameras repeatedly, ensuring all evidence was secure. Grace advised her to keep detailed logs of all contact, no matter how minor. Rachel did, noting times, words, and behaviors with exact precision. Neighbors' statements were collected, offering support for enforcement if needed. Rachel rehearsed her exit plan from the house once the order was granted. Every step was planned: entrance, retrieval of personal items, exit with law enforcement. She visualized the procedure calmly, as though reading a blueprint. Court procedures, law enforcement protocols, even potential objections were anticipated. Rachel knew she could not afford mistakes, hesitation, or emotional reactions. The house, once a place of fear, became a strategic objective. Every act now was deliberate, legal, and documented. Rachel's mind sharpened, each thought aimed at reclaiming control. She reviewed her dossier one last time, double-checking every attachment. Grace smiled, seeing Rachel's transformation from victim to prepared litigant. "You're ready," she said. Rachel felt the weight of fear lift slightly, replaced by the certainty of action. That night, she slept briefly, alert, planning the final reclaiming of her home. Tomorrow would mark the start of enforcement, the first day of legal confrontation. The family that had tormented her would face law, authority, and consequences. Rachel no longer feared confrontation. She had prepared, documented, and strategized every step. This was no longer personal anger. It was organized, lawful, unstoppable action. She closed her eyes, feeling a cold clarity settle. The house would be hers again. The law would ensure it. No one could stop her now. The court granted the emergency protective order the next morning. Rachel returned to her house with law enforcement at her side. Janet, Howard, Sophie, and Derek were served with the order immediately. They protested, shouted, and demanded explanations, but officers remained firm. Rachel watched as they were escorted out, their control finally stripped away. The house, once chaotic, felt still and secure in her hands. Every room was hers again, every corner reclaimed by her authority. She walked through the master suite, noting every detail, untouched this time. Her possessions were intact, her boundaries respected, her sanctuary restored. Rachel felt a weight lift, the months of fear and anxiety melting slowly. She understood she was no longer a victim of their intrusion or manipulation. Every threat and act of abuse had been countered with law and evidence. Her home was protected, her rights enforced, her power undeniable. Rachel sat in her favorite chair, the quiet finally hers to command. She no longer feared family, confrontation, or the chaos they once brought. Preparation and patience had turned terror into control, fear into strategy. The future was hers to decide, free from intimidation, fully in her hands. Rachel smiled, a quiet, resolute smile, knowing she had won more than a house. She had reclaimed her life, her peace, and her power,